My name is Rajni and I work as a corporate trainer. I've been training for more than 10 years and I cover modules on business etiquette, soft skills, accent neutralization, and language. I decided to create this YouTube channel to share some tips on topics that people need help with. So, for example, a lot of people ask me for tips on public speaking. Obviously, public speaking is really important, especially when you're giving a presentation or you're addressing an audience, and even when you're taking the lead in a meeting. So in this video, I will try and cover some tips that may be helpful for you to become a better public speaker. Number one is rate of speech. Rate of speech is nothing but how fast you speak. What a lot of people don't realize is that speaking too fast while addressing an audience is the first sign of nervousness, and the audience will always pick up on this. Think of any good orator, even our Prime Minister. Notice that they never go too fast. They will speak slowly, taking breaks, taking pauses, and stressing on their words to leave an impact on the audience. So it's important that whenever you're presenting to an audience, you consciously slow down and your rate of speech has to be slow. Number two is word stress. In word stress, you highlight the key information in a sentence and you stress more on that information. For example, let's say we're discussing team performances. When I talk about it, I will say something like, in the last quarter, the profit was 2.5 lakhs and the maximum profit was generated by Ramesh's team. Notice how I slow down and stress on certain words and certain information. This is the meat of the conversation, so I will stress more on these words to have more impact on the audience. Third is modulation and being animated. Now, modulation is about using this sing-song quality in your voice so that you don't sound monotonous. Imagine if while making this video, I was talking to you like, third point is modulation and being animated. Animated means expressions. Imagine if I was talking like that, you would lose interest so quickly. So when you are addressing an audience, it's important to use variation in your voice to have the audience's attention, and also by being animated in your expressions. When I say animated, it's very similar to the animated cartoons that you see. They always have really exaggerated expressions, right? So when we're talking to our friends one-on-one, that's when you can be more subtle. But when you're addressing an audience, then you have to seem more lively, more friendly, and more animated to have more impact in what you're saying. Fourth is friendliness and controlled humor. Now, we all have sat through training and presentations where it wasn't very fun, we got bored, and it was too much of a download and too much of data was being shared. This is why it is important to have some form of humor during your presentation or your talk with the audience, sometimes at your own expense. So even when I am training, sometimes I make fun of myself so that the audience is laughing just for that little change so that they don't feel sleepy or bored during the presentation. But make sure that you never cross the line where it becomes like a stand-up comedy session or it becomes offensive and you are making fun of one particular person. If you have to make fun, I think it's best to make fun of yourself, or if you're able to make jokes in a subtle manner just to keep it lively and friendly and so the people don't feel bored during your presentation. Fifth is body language and being able to control it. So it's human to get nervous when we are addressing an audience and talking to a large number of people, especially when we have our seniors sitting in it or when we know somebody is judging us. So in these cases, what happens is we lose control of our body language. I have seen people who are presenting who start slouching when they're presenting because their body language becomes submissive. So their shoulders droop and they are trying to hide inside themselves, and that's how they slouch. Or some people get defensive and they overcompensate by their body language being aggressive, and they get too close to the audience, their gestures are too aggressive. So we have to control this and not be either submissive or too dominating and aggressive. The simplest thing to do is to have your shoulders straight and your chin high and look at the audience and talk to them while smiling. Sixth is using your hands and feet. Another mistake that a lot of people end up making is that when they're presenting, because they're conscious, they stand really stiff. So they will stand in the same position and keep talking to the audience like this. What you can do in this case is start using your hands to gesture and your feet to move around a little bit. So when you're talking, you can show the points on the screen, point at it, and then explain by using gestures like this. The gesturing should be close to your body, not like this, but close to your chest, and small subtle gestures. And with your feet, what I always suggest is take one step to the right, one step to the left, one step forward, or one step backward, little by little throughout your presentation. Don't do it so much that people start noticing it, but just to have loose body language where you look comfortable and confident while using gestures with your hand and your feet. Next is something that is super important but also super scary, which is eye contact. You must have heard that to be a good presenter, to be a good public speaker, you should always maintain eye contact with your audience, but it is scary, right? So it is the same for everyone. I will share some tips on how to maintain eye contact with your audience, especially if it's a big audience. One tip is the sweeping method. So what you do is you start looking at your audience starting from the left, and you slowly sweep your eyes throughout the audience and you go to the right. So from one end to the other end, slowly. It has to be subtle, so you can't be like this. It has to be like, today I'm presenting on this topic and I will be talking about this and this. See how subtly I am looking at everyone. You don't really have to stop and look at someone for a long time. It's just a sweeping gesture. Second style is random. So you look at somebody here, then you look at somebody there, then you look at somebody at the back, and you quickly keep shifting your focus from one person to another. And like this, you don't really have to focus on somebody, but you can maintain eye contact with your audience like this. Next is conciseness. When you're presenting something to the audience or when you're addressing them, make sure that your presentation isn't too heavy and it should work as reference points for you. So when you look at your presentation, you just look at a point and then you maintain eye contact again with your audience and explain in detail what this point is about. Similarly, when you are addressing an audience, you may have a piece of paper where you have some points that you want to talk about. Make sure that you're not digging into your piece of paper too much. You just glance at it, look at the point, then look back at the audience and start explaining about that point. 9 is controlled breathing. Now, controlled breathing is actually related to the first point that I talked about, which is rate of speech, which is going too fast. Now, when you're going too fast, which is when you're nervous, then you sound like you're hyperventilating, and while you're speaking, it sounds a little bit like because you're going too fast. So when you feel like you're starting to get nervous, that's a sign for you to slow down, take a deep breath without the audience noticing, and control your breathing. So whenever you feel like you're nervous, you take a deep breath and you continue talking like this. 10 is about engaging your audience and encouraging questions and clarifications. So if you were able to cover all the points that we discussed earlier by being friendly, being humorous, using the right body language, your audience at this point should be so comfortable with you that they should be able to ask you questions if they have any, or ask for clarifications, even giving inputs. So when I'm training, a lot of times even I learn a lot because my trainees tell me things that I didn't know. So you should have that kind of equation with the audience, that they are able to ask questions or give inputs. If they are not asking you questions, or if they are not being very responsive, then at this point you can even ask them, do you have any questions, or do you want me to clarify something? Are you following everything that I'm covering? And so on. 11 is about being observant and noticing the expressions and reactions of your audience. So, when we are presenting, it is easy to get lost in our notes and not really focus on how the audience is reacting. Sometimes your audience's expressions will tell you exactly what they are thinking. For example, if you're presenting something and somebody doesn't agree with you, they can very softly shake their head like this, and you know that they disagree with you. Or if you're presenting something or talking about something and somebody is getting confused, then they tend to tense their eyebrows a little bit or do this because they're not really understanding what you're saying. In such cases, or also when they are bored, they can start yawning or fidgeting or being too casual in their chair, leaning back. So, when you notice things like this, you can actually be observant and maintain more eye contact with such people. Look at them, or even say something like, "What do you think, Amit?" So, you are forcing them to pay attention to your talk or to your presentation. 12 is keep checking with your audience. Remember, this is not a monologue. Even though you are the only person who's presenting or talking to the audience, it still doesn't mean that you don't have to include them in this presentation. So, a good idea is to keep checking with them whether they follow you or not. So, what I do is when I talk about something, I end it with, "Okay, yeah, right?" So then they are forced to agree with you by saying yes or nodding or showing some sort of response so that you know that they are paying attention also and they're understanding everything that you're saying. Next is using examples and talking about personal accounts. So, when you're talking about something, it is important to give them a lot of examples, maybe from your personal experience. You can say something like, "Oh, when I did this, I also made this mistake, and this is how I overcame this." Or you can say, in this kind of scenario in our organization, we can do something like this, or somebody did something like this in the past and they were successful. So when you talk about people's mistakes or their success stories or best practices, then you make it more relatable for your audience to follow what you're talking about. 14. Fillers and foregons. Now, this is something that a lot of people would have no knowledge about, and they could be making these mistakes without even realizing it. What are fillers and foregons? Fillers are words that you are dependent on. So, words like basically, actually, you know, like, you depend on these words. So whenever you get stuck, you start using these words as fillers. So you say, like, I was going there and like I was trying that, and it didn't work, so I like. So people talk like this a lot. They have fillers that they're dependent on, and they go to those fillers anytime they get stuck. So we have to be conscious to first recognize what are the fillers that we use, and then make a conscious effort to eliminate these fillers, especially when we are presenting to an audience. Similarly, there are foregons. Foregons are the sounds that you make when you're thinking. So you would notice that a lot of times people, when they talk, they say, I was talking about this, and so when you use these sounds too much, it serves as a speed breaker in the conversation, and anybody who's listening to you would start losing interest, and they'll be like, "What is this guy talking about? He doesn't sound sure of himself." So it's important to recognize your fillers and foregons and eliminate them when you are speaking to the audience. And the last point is practice, practice, practice. I know you must have heard this many times, but it is the universal truth. When you start something new, you are more nervous, and as you go along and do it more, you gain more confidence. So, even the points that I talked about today, I have learned these practices over the years in my training experience, and that's why I was able to share this today. So don't be nervous if you're not able to apply all these points the first time you are talking to an audience or presenting something, but keep making notes and keep practicing, and slowly you will gain the confidence and become a great public speaker in no time. So these were some points and some of my learnings through my career, which I thought could help some people who want to become better public speakers. I tried my best to simplify and share these points with you, but you can always comment below and let me know if some point was not clear. I can make another video to explain it better, and you can also suggest more topics in the future that you want me to cover, that you need some help with. I will be happy to make a video about it. So thank you so much for watching this video today. Please feel free to like and share this video, and I'll be very happy if you can subscribe to my channel. Thank you.